What's going on, Warriors, and welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Movement Podcast, Voice for the Voiceless. I'm your host, Chris, and today I have a special guest with us today. We went to high school together, we graduated together, and pretty much haven't really spoken in about 12 years or so, at least face-to-face. And just a little context for what this podcast is going to be about, I titled today's podcast, Making Peace with Your Past. So when Leigh first reached out to me, it was when my brother Santiago passed away last year. He didn't know what went on, he didn't know what happened and everything. And I know we kind of kept in contact since then. And I remember Leigh reaching out to me about getting on the podcast. Now, anybody who's listened to my podcast up to now knows that I'm very open-minded. I try to have the best dialogue I can have with everybody I have on here. My biggest fear with Leigh was, when we were in high school, he gave me a little bit of a hard time. And, I remember saying to my therapist, and I use the word loosely now because I had a misperception about it, that Leigh gave me a hard time in school, and I was always terrified to have a conversation about it. And I never knew I needed to have a conversation about it until he asked if I wanted him on the podcast. So, Leigh, thank you again for that conversation, man. And I'm really happy that we could have that dialogue about, everything that went on. And even more grateful that we had that conversation to clear the air of, any tension that could be here.
Absolutely, man. And I do want to reiterate for your audience. I know we spoke about it a little bit earlier, but it's a perfect example of how you got two people in the same arena participating in the same event with two different perceptions of the situation. Right. I didn't know necessarily what you were going through. I didn't know. I grew up, boxing gyms and fighting and things like that. And my sense of humor is probably ill-mannered. Right. But I didn't know that what I thought was a sense of humor was also terrorizing somebody else. And yeah, obviously, I wish it was better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm glad we.
Yeah. And, when we spoke on the phone, there was something that you said that really spoke out to me. And it was like, we only knew each other on a surface level. And again, just to kind of touch on what you just said of, our perceptions of something being completely different because you and I didn't grow up the same. So, it's great to be able to get on this podcast and, just talk about one of my biggest passions in life. And, that's mental health. And I'm happy to have you on this podcast today, man.
Happy to be here, man. And yeah, the surface level, man. Like, cause even to this day, I've known you probably since I was like 13 years old, but I still don't know a lot about you. I don't know where you're from.
Right.
I don't know you don't know the same about me. So I hope maybe by the end of this we can clear some of those things up.
Yeah, man. And there was a comment that I made before we started the recording about you and Santi having the same birthday, and to me, I think that's like that kind of irony that life threw in there was like, Santi passed away, and maybe, deep down he knew that this conversation needed to happen. So I think sending you out there, I don't know your beliefs, but like, sending you out there in the universe to be like, hey, maybe, we can rekindle a friendship and, and talk about mental health and stuff.
I wouldn't believe that to be true, but I do think it's an interesting coincidence, and I am definitely happy about it. And yeah, hopefully we can dig past some demons, man, and talk about some things.
Yeah, man. So let's get started with the first question I had in here for you. So being a man yourself and have been in the fighting world, what is one of the biggest stigmas that you yourself has had to face?
That's difficult, man. I did feel like that question. A lot of people here, they don't know me, right? So to start off, I was born in DC, right? I came down to school right before I met you. I went to high school with you over in Florida. But, I come from a single family household. Dad wasn't really around, but he raised me. My mom did not raise me. My dad wasn't around because he was working all the time. We were very poor, didn't have much of anything. And athletics was probably the only way that I imagined myself going anywhere, right? Especially at a young age. And it does suck that that's where my self-value was, right? It was in football, later wrestling, and then fighting. And I don't know if that's necessarily a stigma, but I don't think anybody gets into fighting because they're secure people. I mean, for some reason, it's like, who wants to get into a cage with another man get punched in the face, right?
Right.
I absolutely have something to prove. I absolutely have something to prove to myself, to my father, and I love my father, but it's just I wanted to be a man in his eyes.
Right. So
Yeah.
essentially, kind of like seeking that validation that you felt like you didn't grow up with, kind of thing.
Absolutely, but like I said, um, it wasn't his fault, right? I mean, he was a single father doing the best he could to raise me on a very low budget, right? He worked 2 jobs, and he worked very hard, and I spent most of my time alone. But I definitely wanted to make him proud and make something of myself. And for me, my self value is much in athletics.
Right. And I always found it crazy that when we were growing up, we all had our ways to cope with things. For you, it was athletics. For me, it was music, and just kind of seeing where we're at now in our 30s and just seeing how much what we went through helped us to get to now. So I think the stigma there is probably, I guess, just finding that self-worth there, proving yourself essentially, not only to yourself, but to your peers around you. So, it's cool to see that we had our own survival tools before, therapy or whatever it is that we could do now to actually help ourselves. But it's cool to see how we were able to essentially survive up until now.
Absolutely, man, and it's crazy. It doesn't go away, right? Like you
Right.
said, I'm still looking for things to validate myself, and I need challenge. I need to overcome something every single day, right? I'm never happy being content, and I don't know if that's just me or if that's you as well, but I'm never content. I wish I was. I wish I was. I wish I was more of a person like that, but I'm not. And I am grateful for that attitude because I don't get complacent. But at the same time, I wish I was happy with the things I had already.
Right. And I feel like the biggest thing being a human being, you're always wanting more, right? You're always wanting to add to your resume, make more money, of course, just finding those little pieces of yourself just laying around throughout the universe. So essentially you just do anything you can to I guess chase that happiness and finally like have that inner peace within yourself.
Yeah, and I guess the way you phrase that, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing either.
Yeah, not
Um,
at all.
yeah, because it gives you a purpose, right? I'm not saying you should chase money. I absolutely disagree with chasing money, right? But you have to chase something. And I do think you should chase something more than yourself or more than your own pleasures, more than your own happiness. And yeah, here's something about.
Yeah, and I think if you want change in your life, obviously we have to be the ones to make that change. We have to make things happen. Success or whatever it is you're looking for in your life doesn't just come to us, right? It's just you have to put the plan in play and you have to start it to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and if you ever want to be successful after you get the ball and play, it's never going to be easy, right? And I don't necessarily know many of your viewers, right? I don't, but I imagine if they're listening to this, they suffer from some type of mental health issue, correct? I mean, I think we all do, but those are the ones who are at least aware of it enough to listen to this podcast. And I would, if they're upset that they're not happy, I would say that they're probably never going to be happy, and that's okay. That's okay. It's okay not to be happy, right? But you have to be living for something more than your own happiness. For
Right.
me, what I found, it's my God, right? I mean, I'm a Christian, and but also, and after that, it'd be my son, right? I mean, every day I wake up, it's not for myself. It's
Right.
not for my own pleasures. I wake up every day, and I want to please God. I want to live an honorable and honest life. And then after that, it's my son. I want to provide for him. I want to be the man that I would want him to be, or at least try, right, to give him a good example, a good template for himself.
Right.
But
And with us knowing pretty much a lot of the same people, were you close with Santi at all? Like, did you ever like go to church with him or anything, or just like ever talk about being a father or anything? Because I know he was always big on like always giving advice. That man's always giving
yeah,
advice.
I definitely remember having religious conversations with Santi. But for myself, I didn't really find God until probably like 5 years ago, right? So I didn't grow up the same way. I do remember him always talking about God, but at a young age, I was not there yet.
Yeah.
Um, I was not there until after I had my son. And like I said, living for something better than myself. I was very much a heathen before I had my son. And but I woke up one day and I said, hey, what I want my son to be when he grows up, I want him to be a God-fearing man. But I didn't want to be a do as I say, parent, not as I do. So I thought, hey, well, I have to start understanding what the Bible means. I have to start understanding these things. And I'm not trying to turn your podcast religious
No,
podcast,
no, no. Keep going,
but
man.
a lot of my self-worth is in that, that is my purpose. And but it was made because of my son, because I wanted my son to be the same way, right? It wasn't for myself. Because honestly, if it wasn't for my son, I don't know if I would put in the sacrifices that it took. But I sacrifice everything I can to give him a better life and to be a better example for him. But back to your original question with Santi. Um, Last time I talked to Santi was probably 3 years ago, and I think it was more about fatherhood. And I always appreciate Santi. We weren't really close friends. We hung out outside of school, but I remember we sat next to each other in a couple classes. And even just like with you, I reached out to you on Facebook every now and then because, like I said, man, like I like you. Like, hard as maybe to believe, man. I guess I just showed it in a very weird way. But no, I like Santi. But I won't. I was very surprised when he passed, and that was very tragic, especially being a father and knowing what he's leaving.
Yeah. I always found that interesting, because
Of course, I
obviously,
think you're breaking up a little bit.
can you hear me okay?
Let me make sure the Wi-Fi connection is good. Can you hear me?
Can
Are
you
we
hear
here?
me? I can hear you fine.
All right, we're good. All right, good, cool.
Good.
I can't really hear you yet. Let's make sure we're still good. We're here.
We're good.
But yeah,
All
go
right.
ahead. We're around like 10 seconds.
Okay. So basically, I always found it incredible how Santi lived his life, through the Bible and through his religion as well. And, just to kind of piggyback off of that, there's nothing wrong with having that belief system, right? There's, got to have that guideline or some sort of principles to, I guess, give you some sort of guidance, whether it's Christian, Catholic, whatever it is, there's nothing wrong with that belief system. And for me, I wouldn't say I dip too much in the religious aspect. And Santi always appreciated that, and he's always like, God bless you, and just always would share his lessons and everything. So it's always incredible to hear everybody's perspective on religion. Like, you want your son to be, you said a God-fearing man, right?
God-fearing, yes, sir.
God-fearing. Okay. And there's, like I said, there's nothing wrong with having those principles. And I always appreciate hearing people's different perspectives when it comes to that kind of stuff.
No, absolutely. But I know you're close with him, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. And you know, I know I don't want to talk about you too much on the podcast because obviously your audience already knows you. But the mental health struggles that you've been through, I do remember a few years ago. It seemed like you're in a dark place, and it seems like you're better now. If you don't mind me asking for the purpose of conversation, and maybe people don't already know you, like, how did you get here?
So basically, and for all my viewers, if you don't know this, I love sharing my story, and whoever it can help, I'm more than happy to share. So around 2018, I was living in Jersey, and things were just kind of falling apart. Living with my mom, it wasn't a healthy environment. It was very toxic, and I remember writing a suicide note on Facebook. And I know when people are first going to hear that, it's like, oh, well, that just sounds like you are seeking attention. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've heard that sentence said to me. So after I wrote it, I remember reading it back, and I deleted it almost immediately. Two people reached out to me, one of them being my tattoo artist, believe it or not, and Santiago. Santi reached out to me. He's like, hey, man, I know we haven't talked since we graduated high school, and I saw your post and saw you took it down and everything, and I just want you to know that I care about you, and, I don't want to see anything happen to you, and I'm here if you need to talk. So I spoke on the phone for about an hour or so, and probably one of the most life-changing conversations of my life was Santi. And I remember seeking a therapist when I was in Jersey, and that therapy session was only like 3 months because I ended up moving back to Florida. Came back to Florida. Me and Santi became super close. I would go over to his house for family events because he knows my family was unstable. And when I first created this, the mental health group on Facebook, he was one of the first supporters. And I remember after he passed away and how I felt, I was just like, I have to do something to get through this grief, to get through this pain. And the group started blowing up, and I think we're almost to 1,600 members now. And then I started this podcast in January, and just remember everything just coming together and being able to openly talk about Santi's passing, and bringing George on here and him being vulnerable on my podcast was volumes, for any grown man. I mean, I know this as a man, how society looks at you and me when it comes to like emotions or feelings, like, oh my God, he's a grown ass man, he's crying, whatever, and stay away from that kind of thing. And having George on my podcast and being as vulnerable as he could about that podcast with Santi meant everything to me. So, fast forward to our podcast now. I wanted more than anything for this to go as smoothly as possible before we started recording, and I'm glad it did.
Absolutely, man. And obviously, suicide is something that's very touchy, right? You don't want to offend anybody with it, but yeah, it's tough. And I'm sorry. I'm really sorry you went through that, man. I know you know what I do now, but obviously, we spoke before that. There are some aspects to my job, and it's not difficult to find something crazy, right? But I do prefer not to talk about it.
Yeah.
Also, I have paid my own. I don't want to represent any other entities by any means. But like when it comes to like suicide, I mean, I've seen death very closely. I mean, both naturally and violently, and it's tough, man, because there's nothing poetic about it, right? I mean, sometimes even I'm sure experiencing how close you were to Santi and his loss, something about death, and there's no coming back from it,
right?
And not in this world. I mean, it's permanent, right? There's nothing else like it. There's no way to fix it, right? And even if you think, hey, maybe I'll kill myself to make a point, right? Maybe to make them pay, you're not going to be around to see it. And I mean, I would want somebody to hear that, man. Like, I mean, also as a father, right? As a father, I mean, there's times I've been very sad, but I mean, the thought of killing myself, not being there for my son, like I said, when you live for something besides yourself, that would be absolutely selfish. Yeah. I mean, right? And that is why you don't live for yourself. You know what I mean? You get to find. I mean, I'm sure you're going through therapy now. I'm sure you're figuring it out. But I definitely don't think that would be the answer. Obviously, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For me, the conversation of suicide for a really long time was hard to openly speak on. It was just kind of like I felt like I was a victim of my demons and this and that. And then when I look at it now, when I look at who I was in 2018 versus who I am now, I'm a survivor from that person. I'm a survivor from those demons that try to take me away. When suicide happens, when, whoever it is, whether it's a celebrity, whether it's a close friend, whether it's a family member, when suicide happens, speaking on a mental health advocate's perspective, I understand why it happens, and it shouldn't happen. The suicide rate for kids alone is way higher than it should be. And being in the field that you're in, that we spoke on, I'm sure you've seen more things than you would care to want to even try and remember. And hearing, kids take their life and hearing how society looks at it, it's like, oh man, it's just another news post to share. It's just another hashtag for a month and blah, blah, blah. And for me, being in doing a podcast, trying to speak to as many people as I can, man, more than anything in the world, I wish that I can get this message out to the entire world. You know, it's not just another hashtagable month. It's not just another, mental health awareness week. It's something that should be acknowledged every single day. Suicide is something that people look at, they react, they move on. And that's how society is, especially with social media. And I know you don't have Facebook like actually installed, right? The actual app.
I have. I'm never really on it.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you one bit. But it's social media has created this whole wall where it's just like, how many likes can I get? Somebody gets married or somebody's 9 months sober gets 2 likes versus somebody who's posting a picture of their ass in a bikini gets 400 likes. You know what I mean? Like, society's priorities are so messed up, especially with social media, man.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But honestly, I don't think that's going to change, right? I mean, I don't think it's going to change. So, I mean, if you are a person suffering from mental health, I think you have to learn to deal with that. I mean, that's not where you should look for validation, right? Likes and things like that. If you're looking for somebody that cares, I mean, it's sad, but I mean, you have to go out and have a genuine conversation with somebody, right? Find people to reach out to who do care about you. And I'm happy that you found that. It sounds like you did in Santiago, right? But then obviously tragedy can always happen anytime, and the darkness can come back. Yeah. And it's a never-ending fight. And I'm happy that you're still in it.
Yeah. So to the next question I had, I know you mentioned to me that you were a kickboxing champion, right? What kind of preparations did you have to go through to be, I guess, mentally strong in that kind of world? Because I can't even imagine.
Bro, it's difficult, man. Honestly, it's my entire life. Like I said, I don't think any person is going to get into a ring, a cage, or anything with another man who's trained to basically kill you and not have some type of insecurity to overcome. I grew up, I was very insecure, man. I was very insecure, right? I needed to prove myself. I needed to be a man, you know what I mean? And fighting was my way. And to be honest, I mean, what was me? Like, I genuinely enjoyed the skill and the art that I found in fighting. But to prepare for a fight, you really don't. You're nervous, man. I remember just sitting in the back, hoping that I don't get knocked out in front of my friends. Think about the embarrassment that would be. Thankfully, that never happened. I did win the ISKA championship a few years back before I finally just gave it up because there wasn't a lot of money in it, to be honest. Right. And it was a lot. It was a lot, but I learned a lot about myself. As a young man, I learned a lot about myself in that ring. I think even the last time I fought, I fractured my leg in the middle of in the first round. She checked one of my kicks. I fractured it. I remember feeling it kind of crack a little bit. I mean, I didn't know what it was. It hurt, but I finished, right? And you learn a lot about yourself in those moments. Yeah. I finished at third. I ended up coming out of that fight victorious. And it wouldn't matter if I didn't. At the end of the day, the fact that, overcoming adversity, it's definitely a learned skill. And I definitely think that makes me a stronger person today, both mentally and physically.
Yeah, and I think it's also important that when you do something like that, you finally start learning your limitations on, how much you can push your body, and like you said, you fractured your leg, man. I remember when I tried doing wrestling school, and I tore my shoulder. And I was in a sling for like 6 weeks, on Percocet and all that stuff. And I just remember, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have been doing this, and maybe I should have been better prepared or whatever. But like you said, nobody prepares to get hit in the face, right?
Yeah. And it's that you mentioned, it's pretty crazy. You mentioned knowing limitation of our body, because I was thinking about this week because I'm doing a new workout program, and there's some of the sets on there. I don't know if you did a workout program before, but it says max. So basically, you do as many reps as you can in one set. And I refuse to do that because I'm too arrogant and I have too much of an ego to believe that I have a max or that I have a limit, right? Because for me to accept that I cannot go any further is It's weird, man. I can't accept it. So I have to put a set number in my head. I can't do those sets.
Like, oh, there's only an 800-pound limit. Oh yeah, bet. Let me bring 200 more pounds in here.
No, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I'm sure they love you at Planet Fitness. You just bring in your whole weight set. I'm like, screw you guys. I'm doing my own thing.
I'm not allowed that place, but yeah.
Okay, I gotta hear this story. Why aren't you allowed in there?
It's not a story. I'm not banned or anything. I don't think the way I work out is coexist with the brand that they have.
I can only imagine.
We can only imagine.
You just take all the weights off the other machines. This isn't enough.
I was screaming, you know what I mean? I was slamming.
I can only imagine the manager just coming. What's going on here? There are no more weights in the entire gym. I'm done. Get this guy. So you mentioned that you were a father. As a father, I'm more than certain that it comes with its challenges. Do you feel there's a stigma in being a parent and how you are supposed to be a parent?
How am I supposed to be a parent? I mean, I guess it depends who you ask, right?
Yeah.
And it depends who you ask. I could vary in many ways, but I definitely think there's a standard to being a parent. I have my standard, as you know, it's based off the Bible, right? But everybody has their own standard, their own stigma. But it's difficult. It's very hard, and there's a lot of pressure behind it. I know. I don't think you have kids, right, Chris?
Nope.
Yeah. So I already had my son. I have one son. I had him when I was about 22, 23 years old. I was young, right? I was just starting the job I'm in now, and I remember getting a picture. I was in the front row of a training class. I got a picture of a pregnancy test, and everything's history after that. But I was grateful for it because it absolutely changed my life in a way that it needed to be changed. But I didn't grow up with siblings. I didn't grow up with little brothers or anything like that. So my son was the first diaper I ever changed. I remember being in the hospital with him. I remember thinking, wow, this is a lot more than I thought it would be. Right. And it is very difficult. And I don't see actually in the room right now. But as far as the stigma goes, what stigma are you actually describing?
So, okay. So you mentioned that you were 22, 23, you said when you had your son?
Yeah.
So I guess the stigma there would be like, you're a young parent kind of thing. Like, did you ever experience that? Like, oh, you're having kids this young, or what are you gonna do, kind of thing? Like, I know I've heard that from so many people's parents that their children had kids too young or whatever. So
And I definitely experienced that, man. Something that is great from what I've done in my past and what I've done in my athletic background was that I was used to being ridiculed. You know what I mean? On a public stage, I was used to saying, what you do is not good enough, or you do whatever. And I learned to accept that and not worry about that too much. But I definitely experienced that. And, just even because I was my son's mother's still in his life, but we were separated. So I want to use the term single father very precisely. I mean, we co-parent. But so I don't want to think that his mother's not around because she is, and she's a good mother. But just being a single father, what was difficult, right? You're being out in public with him alone and things like that, and people wondering what happened, right? And it wasn't easy, but in the end, it was worth it because I do have my son from it, and I'm happy for that. And you can look at it, you can look at the stigmas of anything, and you can be upset about anything. You can take the negative turn with anything, right? But at the end of the day, typically those things make you stronger.
Yeah. So walk me through the co-parenting thing. Like, is there any challenges for you personally for co-parenting? Because I know some people have a really good experience with it, and I know you said she's a good mom, so that's already like miles high a positive. So like, are there any challenges for you doing what you do for that co-parenting?
I'm really grateful, man, because I don't have a baby mama or a child's mother who would try to take my son away from her or anything like that, and nor would I ever try to take her son away from her. And I would imagine that everybody listening to this, I can't imagine everybody's in the same situation as I am, right? Because there are some very spiteful people in this world, whether it be fathers or mothers, who might try to take the child away. And I can't even speak to the challenge. Honestly, it's probably as good as it can be. We both want the best for our son, not ourselves, right? We both don't let jealousy or pride or ego get in the way. And I would suggest that for anybody who's going through this problem as well, because the child's first, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I have a whole theme to any of this, to anything I'm saying, is that nothing you do should be for yourself.
Yeah.
Nothing, right? Nothing. It should. I mean, everything should for everything you do should be for a greater purpose, right? And then the situation, it is my son, right? So I'm not gonna let jealousy or pride or ego stop him from experiencing the love of a mother. And I respect her enough to understand her enough to think that she wouldn't do the same to me.
It's really, I think it's really important that you noted about people being spiteful when they're parents. And like I see people posting about their baby daddy, their baby mama all the time on Facebook, be like, oh well, she's this or he's that. And it's just like, I wish more people were more civil when it came to their kids, because I grew up in a broken home myself. My parents divorced very young. I think I was 8 when they divorced. And I remember when it first happened, and I reacted in a way I can't really explain. I know it kind of went off the deep end when I was 8, but like I couldn't imagine social media being around then, like
Yeah.
MySpace or Facebook, because social media has made parenting, I feel like for many couples, so bad, because it's just like, oh, well, you like this person's photo, or I saw the status you made about me, or you're throwing shade, blah blah blah. And I just, what advice would you give those people that, I guess, put their dirty laundry on social media?
If you can't handle me, to get off of it. Yeah, I mean, like you see me, I don't post a lot. It's not just like I can't handle it. It's just I don't spend my time with it. I mean, it's a bunch of people in their fake facade lifestyles, and you're never going to meet their standards, right? And everything you post probably isn't true, right? And then for you to go to the person, the mother of your child or the father of your child, to make them look bad in a permanent way, right? Where people can view that and see that forever. Maybe your child, maybe later in life, they get Facebook, they see the old posting made about their parent. That's just, in my opinion, that's not the way it should be done. Um, that's not the way you work through problems. That's not the way you talk to people. That's not the way you communicate in any way, shape, or form. And it makes nothing better.
Right.
That would be the advice I would give. Is if you cannot handle it, just get off it. I guarantee your life will be more peaceful.
Right. I completely agree. I think some people are just so deep into social media that they can't see beyond that screen. Like I can't even tell you how many people I hang out with that just stare at their screen all the time, and you're trying to have a conversation with them, and it's just like, dude, do I gotta like tweet you something for you to hear me? You know what I mean? Like, ugh. So to follow up with that question, what is the most important lesson that you teach to your son from your own experiences?
There they have it. That do not live for yourself, right? Sometimes he'll come and say he's bored, whatever, right? I'm like, it doesn't matter, right? Like your purpose right now, the thing you're doing, if you're reading, you're bored, that's fine. I don't care if you're bored. My job is to make you better. Your job is to be a better person, right? And later you can pass on to somebody else. And I teach them not to chase happiness, to not chase happiness, to chase what's honorable, to chase what is true, right? And that's it. Well, what is honorable? What is true? Your happiness doesn't really matter in that equation. If you could, we can all find pleasures and vices outside of that that will make us happy for a moment, bring us gratification, but that does not serve us, right? And I don't think there's any really, even if you do chase happiness, I don't think there's anything really true about it. I mean, it is a fact that if you were to do a line of cocaine right now, you would be happy, right? I mean, it releases the hormone in your head, releases dopamine in your mind, and it makes you literally happy. When you wake up the next day, you're probably not so happy, right? You're probably in a long line of regret and everything else. So I teach them, don't chase happiness. Chase what is honorable, what is true. In the end, you will be happy, or at least you'll be satisfied with the man that you become.
That's powerful. I like that a lot. Do you feel there is a stigma behind men's mental health? Like, what does it mean to you that society has finally started coming around to acknowledging that men go through struggles too? So I guess it's kind of a two-parter question.
I think my opinion would be a little bit different. There's a stigma behind mental health that I'll let you. I'll let you because obviously you're a professional on this. You tell me. Well, what is the stigma behind mental health?
So kind of like what we were talking about before we started this podcast was, just kind of like men can't cry. Men are supposed to feel what they're feeling inside. We're supposed to internalize it. We're supposed to take all the bruises and not speak out to what we're feeling. So I guess, do you see that for yourself too? Like, do you ever get to that point where you want to feel some certain way, but you're around certain people and you can't feel that way, or just anything, I guess, along those lines?
You know, I think my opinion may be a little bit different than yours. I mean, you know what
Share
I
it,
did?
man. Go for it.
I was a fighter, and you know what I do now. And I've had very very close friends to me killed, right? And something I learned from that is that you still have to keep going, right? You still have to keep moving forward, and even yeah, you still have to keep going forward. And there's a time to cope, right? There's a time to mourn, but there's also a time to control it, right? I mean, I gave you the example of me breaking my leg in a fight and continuing to fight and coming out winning. That never would have happened if I would have broke down, which it'd be reasonable, right? I have a broken leg in the middle of a fight with a man trying to kill me. I mean, that'd be reasonable, but I do think as a man you should learn to control it. I don't think it's wrong to cry. I think there's a time and a place for it. I do think you should find people you can trust, and a circle that you can trust, and friends that you can trust to do that with. I would not expose myself to the world because the world is very treacherous, as you've seen, right? I mean, because even though with that stigma, people will still come down to you, and that's gonna make you feel any better, right? So
Absolutely.
there's no benefit to that. So find the people that you love, the people that you trust, and keep that circle tight and keep that circle close, and then do it there, right? But yeah, it's a balance, right? Anything's balance. Anything's balance. Should we be open with our feelings with anybody? Absolutely not, because you can't trust everybody, right? You can't trust everybody, and people they want to see you fail. They want to see you bad, and you're going to give them the satisfaction of that, give them something to talk about. But there's a time to control it, and then there's a time to do it. And like I said, I do think it should be done in close quarters.
I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned the balance comment and also keeping that tight circle, because like you said, being vulnerable with the world around you could be both positive, but then you have that large group of people that will look for the dagger, look where to stick the dagger next and use that against you. So it's interesting you say time and place, because at first I was just kind of like, okay, we're on the different sides of the spectrum here when it comes to that. But then you reiterated with the keeping that close, tight circle, and it started making a lot more sense when you were explaining it. So I definitely agree. The time and place thing is a big one, simply because you can't trust everybody that you tell everything to. I there's a lot of things I wouldn't tell people I've known for 20 years that I'd tell somebody that's in my very close circle, and that's just, I feel like you said, having that balance is super important, and it helps you keep a sane mind and I guess inner peace within yourself to not let the world know what you're going through all the time. Kind of like social media. It doesn't need to be all out there.
Absolutely, and something specific with men, right? I mean, I have a family, and they look up to me, and they look for me to make the right decisions, right? And if I told them everything that was going on in my mind, every doubt I had about myself, every insecurity I had about myself, because I have many, I don't, I don't think it would benefit them. You know what I mean? And I do think as like, especially like a father, right? I'm not going to go to my son and say, "Hey, Dad has no idea what he's doing right now," right? I just hope that, um, I just hope that I do the right thing, and that in the end, I did my best, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the biggest thing we can do is our best. A lot of people underestimate that phrase when it's just like do your best. Like, oh, what does that mean? People tell me that all the time. I don't know what do your best means. I'm like, dude, what you're doing right now is what you're supposed to be doing. As long as you're not causing harm to anybody, you're exactly where you need to be in life right now. Sometimes we feel stuck. Sometimes we feel like we're not contributing enough, right? And that was one of the strong points I tried to make in my last podcast about, social norms and expectations around us. Like, we're always supposed to be go, go, go. We can never, I guess, practice self-care and take care of ourselves. We have to make sure that everybody else around us is happy, and all that nonsense that society tells you you're supposed to do.
So it's the same question, like, where are you with that? Where do you think where do you think it's, do you agree with what I said, or are you somewhere else with that? And
Yeah,
it's
no,
fine.
I like I said, when you got to the end of your explanation, it made 100% more sense than when it started out, just because I thought we were going to be standing on different parts of the conversation. But once you started explaining it, I'm right in the middle with you. I completely agree with you. Like, if I had kids, I would tell them, it's okay to express how you're feeling, and like you said, keeping that balance and not just sharing it with random people or posting all your I guess your dirty laundry all over social media, because not everybody needs to know every single thing that you're going through. There's people you can trust, like you said, in your inner circle, and of course there's those mental health resources as well that can help with that too.
Absolutely. I'm glad that's clear now.
Yeah, no, we're good. um, so I guess after we graduated high school, did you ever feel there was this pressure or expectation for you to go to college, or for you to immediately jump into a career path? Like, did you have that over your head when we graduated?
Well, like I told you, I grew up in a very impoverished state, right?
Mhm.
My dad worked very hard to provide for just me as a single father. So when I was 18, I went away for some time, right? And I ended up coming back. And when I came back, I definitely felt I needed a job, right? And I don't think it's wrong to feel that way.
Not at all.
Uh, as a young man out of school, you should feel pressure to do what young men do, and that's provide, right? Or in my opinion, what young men should do. I mean, you need to get out to the workforce and try to make your way and make a living. And I absolutely 100% felt that pressure. I moved out when I was 18, um, and I really haven't been back since, for visiting purposes, obviously. But there's times where it was very hard. It was very hard. My dad was very loving, and by no means did he kick me out, but I definitely felt the pressure to be away from home because I wanted to be my own man. I remember I had a friend that took me in. I was sleeping on his floor for about a year of my life while I was still fighting and things like that because there wasn't any money in it for me.
Right.
And yeah, and by the end of the day, I'm grateful for that because it makes what I have now, what I am now, just feel so much better.
It's very interesting to see how different it was for us when we graduated compared to like classes after us, like 5 years after us, where these kids just, I guess you don't really see them want to put in hard work. They want to have things given to them. Obviously, not all of them, but you see that generational difference between, the people that were in our graduating class and the people that followed after us. It's just kind of like, we were told that we're supposed to do A, B, C, and they want the end of the train already. They want that money now. And I don't know. I always found it funny to see how different me and my brother uh were when we graduated high school, because he is 26 now. Yeah, he's 26 now, and him and I just have different perceptions of life. I've been working since I was 19, so it's just kind of one of those things where we grew up in that time where it's just like, you need to go out into the world, you need to experience the world. You can stay at home, but you need to work. So it's always interesting to hear a different perspective from other people.
Yeah, I don't know too much about the people after me, right? So I won't speak on that too much. But I think our predecessors probably would have said the same about us, right?
That's fair.
But then also, I mean, I can tell you this, something is new. I don't want to say social media is toxic, right? There's definitely a benefit to it. The fact that I can still connect with you 12 years later when 20 years ago, this never would have happened, right? Yeah, we never would have heard from you again, thought you saw me again, whatever, right? So there's definitely a benefit to it. But I was talking to this young man the other day, and I asked him, "Hey, like, what do you want to be? Like, what are you trying to do with your life? Because you have to do something." And he told me that he wants to be a social media influencer. I'm just like, yeah, I, as a man, I don't think that's the place to find your value, right? I mean, if you already have things going for you, absolutely, absolutely, man. If people are just liking your post, you're getting paid from it. I mean, who might argue with that? But to go and chase that, to me, that's not very, it's not very validating. I don't see any, I don't see any opportunities for anything in there, right? As far as you can get money, but at the end of the day, is money the only thing that drives you, right? Do you want some type of purpose, some type of gratification, some type of fulfillment? I don't think you can get your that calling yourself a social media influencer and to hear the confidence that he said it in, right? To hear the confidence that he said it in, it was disappointing.
Right.
Because,
And it's interesting you made the fulfillment comment because I see my brother. He was doing the Twitch thing for a little while. He got affiliated and stuff, and I guess he finally just started realizing that, like you said, there's not a ton of money in there unless you're set up to make that money. Like you got to put in years for anything to happen for you doing that kind of stuff. And being a social media influencer, isn't bad if you have a foundation to stand on. Like if I were to keep working doing the job that I'm doing and want to get paid for doing this podcast thing, I could do it because I have that foundation to stand on and my lights stay on. I'm not gonna rely on people that I don't know to follow my gaming journey or whatever the hell somebody's doing on the social media influencing career path. But I don't know, man. I wish that the generation after us just kind of saw there's more value in going out there into society and I guess not necessarily physical labor, but I guess being around other people and actually working, like actually doing jobs that you can feel fulfilled and helping people, or I guess just creating that foundation for you to stand on your own 2 feet.
even physical labor, like my my financial situation, we do pretty well, right? But my son, he's probably set, right? He's probably set, but at the end of the day, I want him to do something physical. I would love for him to be a mechanic. I would love for him to do some type of construction or anything, right? Do want to work with his hands. I definitely think there's a fulfillment of building something from beginning to end. I definitely there's some fulfilling about doing something with your hands and creating things, right? And the fact that you said physical, I absolutely agree that is the way to go for a young man. I'm not that's not the only way to go, but
Yeah.
What I would want for my son, I would be absolutely happy if he were to do that.
Right. Like you said, the fulfillment of building something from beginning to end, like that's gratifying. I feel like if you want to feel any kind of like fulfillment, it doesn't have to be construction, it doesn't have to be a mechanic, like it could be anything in that physical labor kind of thing. Like, when we were going to school, FCAT was something that prevented me from doing anything.
I
I
didn't know
was
that.
in
Also,
intensive reading from 7th grade all the way to senior year.
really,
And yeah, I couldn't do any electives because of that. So I couldn't go to Marchman to do any kind of like trade classes or anything like that. Like I struggled a lot in high school. High school sucked. Um, but it's not about living in the past. It's what you do with all the things that you went through. So yeah, it sucks that I was put in this position, the position I was in school, but I wouldn't take anything back because of where I'm at now. I'm very, very proud of everything that I've accomplished.
no, I didn't know that. What is your opinion of like FCAT test that went away? Did it not?
Yeah, FCAT I think went away after we graduated, the year after we graduated.
Man, it's crazy to hear terms like that, man. It's been so long.
So you want to hear something funny is in junior year, I took the SAT and passed it with flying colors. I couldn't pass the FCAT since 7th grade. Like,
Really?
yeah, I hated the FCAT more than anything in the world.
I think that is.
Huh?
Why do you think that is?
What? I don't know. I feel like the SAT kind of was all relevant material, is probably why I passed it. I mean, I
But
feel like the FCAT just kind of threw everything together with stuff you may or may not have learned. But, I don't know, man. I always struggled with tests growing up. So that didn't help either.
yeah,
I'm
man.
not against testing. Like, I think the end of the year testing, because I know you asked me how I felt about that. So I'm on the fence with it, man. I feel like there's nothing wrong with taking those tests. I just don't think it should prevent kids from chasing something that they're passionate about. Because
Yeah,
that's exactly what it did to me.
I mean, if I don't know how I would feel about that honestly. But my son, I don't know if the standardized test still exists, right? But if they do, I mean, I do believe in standards. I will say that I do believe in um not lowering a standard just fit things because it wouldn't be a standard, right? But also I do understand that not everybody's the same person, right? And some people do. Some people are very intelligent and they still can't get past these things. So I don't know, man. There's no right answer for all this stuff.
Yeah, I feel there's people that are book smart and there's people that are street smart. I think there's more of a benefit being street smart than there is being book smart sometimes. And I only say that because, we see some of these kids go to school for 8 years, never working a day in their life. And when they get out of college, it's like, oh, I want this job because I have this piece of paper here. And
Absolutely. When I think about when I reflect on school, right? I'm not speaking for everybody, but it's basically how well do you remember things,
yeah,
and that's remember things as intelligence. I mean, I'm sure it's a part of intelligence, but that's not intelligence, right? That's not problem solving. That's not working through things. That's not creating things. It's just how well do you remember this, and can you regurgitate it when test day comes?
right. And I just feel that when we were in high school, anxiety and all that stuff wasn't an acknowledged thing. Like, we, for me at least, always felt, there was something off about me that I never really could pinpoint anything. Like, I know I had depression from when I was 8 years old to now. And, that's not something that goes away. It carries over, anxiety was a term that I probably didn't start hearing uh maybe when I was like 21, 22, something around that. I never heard that term until around then. Or at least it was never, I guess, brought to my attention what it was. And I remember when I had my first anxiety attack, and it was one of the worst feelings I've ever had in my life. My mom has been taking Xanax since she was like 16 years old. And I'm very against pills. I don't agree with pills.
I'm going to ask you that. I'm going to ask you how you feel about medication as far as
If,
anxiety.
if it's absolutely needed, because I know there's people that have that chemical imbalance, right?
Yes.
I feel if therapy or any other kind of treatment can't help that person, then sure, I would consider, take this medication, but a very low dosage of it. My mom has taken Xanax her entire life. If she doesn't take it for like a day, she has nonstop panic attacks. And Xanax is something I will never touch. Like, I had a half of one time. I will never touch that shit ever again. Awful.
If you don't mind me asking, because all that stuff's a little bit foreign to me, but genuine question, like how does therapy help you?
Oh, this is actually a really good question. So, therapy provided me that safe place to be able to share whatever demons I've had in my soul since I was a kid. I've been exposed to sexual things when I was very young. I was exposed to different forms of abuse that I was never able to speak out about. When I found my therapist that I have now, she has helped me celebrate holidays again. And I know this is going to sound weird, but I struggled celebrating holidays forever because of both working for Publix and having a basically unstable family around the holiday season. So I hated Christmas. I hated Thanksgiving because I just didn't really care for my family. Not to say that those feelings have gone away about my blood relatives, because a lot of them are pretty toxic. But I remember when I first bought this apartment 2 years ago, put up my first tree. I hated the sight of a Christmas tree. Like, I was very weird with holidays. Like, oh, well, I hope you have a good Christmas. I'm like, oh, well, I can't wait till it's over. And that was my mentality. And fast forward past the holiday stuff, I was able to pinpoint what triggers that I had in the back of my head, what things would set me off. And when I was able to identify those triggers, I was able to heal from those things, like my conversations with my mom. I try my best to not talk to her because we have a very unhealthy relationship, and she's a very toxic human being. But I've learned how to put up boundaries for myself. I've learned to cut people out of my life when needed, and it just overall helped me communicate. Just anything that goes on in my head. If it wasn't for therapy, I don't think this podcast would have been possible.
So essentially, it gives you what you said, a safe place to talk, right? And is that it? A safe place to talk?
A safe place to talk, and it helped me find myself.
Okay, but I mean, how? How did it help you find? Because I've never been a therapist, so I really don't know.
Yeah. So basically, it was just therapy brought new perspectives to things that I thought somebody was saying, something to me because they didn't like me or something. And my therapist would flip it around and be like, maybe they meant it this way, or here's how you can have a conversation with this person the next time things come around. It helped me distance myself from my parents.
Like our situation, right?
Sorry?
Like our situation.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I had the conversation with my therapist about you and I. And I was scared how you were going to respond. Just because again, we didn't talk for 12 years and we only knew each other on a surface level. So that this is a huge step for me. Like, this podcast is a huge step for me. Was just, I don't want to say it wasn't a confrontation, but it was a conversation that I needed to have.
No, I'm absolutely happy that you have the opportunity to have it. Yeah, because I mean, I've been pretty sad in my life, and there's been times where somebody said, "Hey, what? Like, you could talk to a therapist." I'm not gonna say I was against it, right? But I always perceived it as something that was not for me, because I always thought, like I said, I do have a tight circle, a very tight circle, very close friends, and I always thought that I have my safe, what you call the safe space there, But if you don't have that, then I can definitely understand the benefit in it.
And there's also two more benefits that I wanted to bring up too, because I forgot to mention them. But therapy helped me grieve a lot. It helped me get through passing of one of my close friends, Amy, that passed away 2 years ago. And then when Santi passed away, yeah, it hit me hard because he was like a brother to me. But I was able to do things to celebrate his life. Like, when their birthdays come around, I like to do those little Chinese lanterns and write something on it and release it into the sky kind of thing. And it helps give an outside perspective for somebody who's not in that tight circle. I can tell something to my good friend Caleb, but it would be a perspective that he knows of the situation versus my therapist, who doesn't know my mom. She's never met my mom, and she can offer a therapist perspective into that.
When you said after high school, when you said you went to 2018, you said you went to New Jersey and things weren't good for you. You know, I ask, like, I really want to understand what is it that you're not happy about? Is it finances? Is it relationships? Is it like
Are you talking about? Are you talking about why it drove me to where it was up there? So when I moved up there, it was right after I got done healing from my surgery and everything, and things with my dad were just kind of, we never had a really great relationship, and my mom basically put up this whole fake picture in front of me saying, if you come up here, you can work and save money and be on your own and blah 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 and be happy. When I moved up there, it was like that for about a month, and then she started taking a lot of money from me when I was working, so I couldn't put money aside. Going into what led me to that post and that whole thing is I was downstairs, I was talking to a friend, and we were just, just having a conversation. And my mom comes down and she starts screaming at me. Like, I try to keep to myself. I don't try to start anything with anybody. I'm very to myself. 3 straight hours, she yelled at me without me saying a word, saying that I wasn't shit, that the reason why I was single was because of XYZ. And she berated me and degraded me to the lowest possible point that I could ever be driven. And I think that's the first time I've openly said that outside of a therapy session. So it was a very rough uh, berating from somebody who's supposed to be your mom and actually give a shit about you. And, she made me feel like I was nothing, and it drove me to the point I'm like, maybe she's right. Maybe I'm not worth anything. And that's what drove me to where I was at, man.
Here's your mothers. So I'm not really close to my mother, right? Her and my father split when I was 5. My father raised me by himself. I'm not gonna. I don't want to sit here and say my mother abandoned me, but her and my father separated, and she was not much in my life after that. Right? There were a few times. I remember. I remember coming to my high school graduation. I remember us going to she did like a little party at the beach, which is very close, like her family and my girlfriend at the time. And I remember I left that breaking down crying. She threatened to, like, I don't want to say kill me, man. It was she threatened violence on me as an 18-year-old or 17-year-old kid who just was looking for his mother to be proud of him because graduated high school. It's not much of an achievement, but it is what it is, right? And it I don't think parents necessarily understand the damage they do to their children, right? Because
Words hurt, man.
and from both perspectives, right? As a child, I mean, each understand that your parents they're very human, very imperfectly human. But then also as a parent, you should understand that your children are very fragile, right? And when if anybody else insulted me, if anybody else did the same things to me, I mean, I've had violence threatened on me many times as a kid, right? I mean, I was young, and at that point in my life, I think I'd already had guns pulled me the first time, right? I mean, just being a young kid, just doing stupid things around stupid people. But as a hearing from your mother, hearing from your father, that's different. You know what I mean? Because that's the person you perceive as the person supposed to take care of you, love you, and nurture you. And so when it doesn't happen, it's not only is it the same pain, but it's also a betrayal of trust, like intrinsic trust that you're born with almost. You know what I mean? Your own, like, I'm sure. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, man, but I'm sure that you want a good relationship with your mom, right? There's something that still calls you to her, right? Just it's natural. I'm not saying that's the way you should go. I'm not saying that's the way you should not go. But there's something natural that pulls you to that because every young man, young woman, they want that relationship with their father, their mother, and it's a responsibility. It's a responsibility to be a parent,
Yeah.
and something that holds great power. That if you do have a young child, that you should cherish and tread very lightly and be careful what you do.
Absolutely. And deep down, I would love for a better relationship with her, I guess. But being 30 years old and it being a pattern since I was very young, and she hasn't changed at all. She's gone from house to house, from relationship to relationship. It's just kind of one of those things where at what point do you stop giving somebody chances? And every chance that she was given, I don't wish ill on my mom, and I don't want her to go away, but it's just kind of one of those things where I keep her further than arm's distance. I don't want a relationship with her anymore. I just want to be left alone. And I know the day that I have kids, I know how not to treat them because of how I was treated.
I mean, I'm not one to be as vulnerable as you are, as I'm sorry for that. But
No,
I
no,
will,
don't apologize, man.
yeah, but I will say that I've probably had every thought that you've had in regards to myself. But hey, man, it's difficult. For some reason, I do remember because we've been Facebook friends for a long time, right? And I sporadically go in there. I remember seeing you. I remember we went to New Jersey. I remember that post. I remember I remember thinking that would be difficult because, in my opinion, in my opinion, it seemed like you were running and running away. It doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't really work. I mean, there's absolute moments where you need to get away from something, right? But when you're going to New Jersey seeking a better life, I don't think New Jersey would made a better life for you. You
Right.
know,
100%.
I remember saying that. I also remember, wasn't there some type of like love interest that you had?
Not in New Jersey, no.
No, but down here,
Yeah.
yeah. In my opinion, I remember thoughts. I remember thoughts. I remember thinking that you're getting away from that,
Right.
and yeah, running, and it's difficult, man. So that's what we want to do, but it doesn't
And
help.
it's funny that I've never really openly saw that I was running away from Florida until I guess I had my first therapy session up there. Um, when I first went to that therapist up there, I just remember 2 straight sessions. I couldn't look her in the face, and I was doing nothing but crying. I just was so upset because this was after that conversation that I had with my mom. Just things I didn't know who I was, I didn't know what to do anymore. And before I moved back down to Florida, I remember saying to the therapist, when I left Florida, it was because my mom was always somebody to run from her problems. And I felt like that was what I was doing, is not addressing whatever demons I had down here in Florida. When I came back, I saw all the people who I thought were like my good friends. I saw exactly who they were. And that in therapy helped me see that. It helped me see that there were so many unhealthy parts of myself that I left down here, and I never realized they were unhealthy until I came back. So fast forward to now, I don't regret going to New Jersey. I just regret I let my mom get me to the point of what I got to, because that person then is a completely different person now. I would never let that happen ever again.
Yeah, and I guess that is the benefit to it, right? That is the benefit of suffering, right? Is that you learn from it, and you're stronger at the end of the day from it, because the world's full of suffering, and it's not going away in this world, right? And I think I think you being a person who has a podcast, some type of influence, right? I think you would hope that your podcast could change the world and change the way people see mental health and suicide, right? But in the end, it'll probably be futile, right? I mean, we can't fix things. I mean, like we're so small, and the grand scheme of things, we're so small, right? Even if you reach every single person in the world, which would be impossible, how many people will listen? You know what I mean? Because legitimately just do not care.
And
And
you made a comment before about you not being able to be vulnerable, and you appreciated what I said because it was what was on your mind. That's one of the biggest reasons I do what I do, because I have met probably over 50 something people, or I've talked to over 50 something people about this mental health journey, about this podcast. Mostly guys that'll reach out to me like, hey man, like, I know I don't post a lot, I know we don't talk, and I just wanted to say I appreciate what you put out there because it's what I'm going through. And you being somebody that I was never close to, but now we can have this conversation. You just making that comment just makes this podcast that much more worth it, man. Because obviously, when I do these podcasts, I don't expect you to be an open book. I don't expect you to tell me every detail of your life, but just being willing to listen and I guess respond in a way that makes you feel comfortable is why I do this.
absolutely, and also your audience, it gives them somebody to relate to, right? Something to
Yeah.
relate to situation, so that they feel that they're not alone. And there's definitely a benefit in that, and there's definitely a benefit in you opening yourself up and then showing your success story, right? How you overcame the what could have been a potential tragedy.
Yeah. So I guess being at the age we are at now, how important do you feel your social status is? Do you prefer having many friends, or do you prefer having that small circle of people you can count on? Kind of going back to our last conversation about the tight circle.
Um, I try to be friendly with every person that I can be, right? I mean, absolutely, I definitely think there's benefits to both. Uh, but I definitely keep my small circle of people I open up to, right? But I definitely want to be peaceful. I want to be peaceable. I want to be what as long as I know that I'm doing the right thing, right, and that I know that I'm friendly, that I know I'm honest, I know that I'm true to my purposes, that if people don't like me after that, it doesn't really matter, right? the My social status is, as far as like with that being a title, it doesn't really mean anything to me. I have to stay true to what I know and to what my goals are, and in my mind, that is very very solidified,
Yeah.
right? I think some people, they do end up in a bad way because their purposes are not solidified in themselves. You know what I mean? They don't know what they're looking for. They're lost, and they're kind of going every single way. And then the moment anybody gives them any type of attention or affirmation, then they think maybe I should go that way, right? And I think that's difficult, and that's why I'm grateful for like I'm grateful for what I've learned and what I've done, because I know who I am and I know what I want.
And I always feel, that finding that identity within ourselves is always super important. And seeing a couple of the people that we graduated with, I try to keep tabs on, a couple of people just because I remember them from our graduation class, or I thought they were cool, and whatever. Obviously you had those really popular kids that played football, cheerleaders, all that stuff. And I go to their Facebook sometimes, and it's just like that person hasn't changed since we graduated. They just kind of like that social status is still something very high in their priority list, and just kind of like they don't have an identity. It's just their identity is with the giant circle of people that they've been hanging around with since we graduated. You know what I mean?
I'm curious, where do you classify me at in high school?
So
Honestly,
again, we knew each other on that social level, but surface level. So I guess I kind of always grouped you in with like the people that everybody knew. Like everybody knows Leigh, everybody knows Cody. You just uh, everybody in the school knew who you were. So I guess not really knowing you beyond like having the classes that we had together, I'm not really sure. I guess one of the popular kids. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't really know you beyond having those classes. So, you know,
that's definitely fair, man. I look back at that time of life because I do think everybody knew who I was, right? I mean, because sports, whatever, whatever. But even then, I had a very very small circle, man. Like I wasn't the type to go to parties. I had very few friends, right? And we did just stupid things together. like uh, but it's just, to me, it's just interesting to hear another person's perspective, an outside perspective. You know,
yeah.
um, it's odd. It's odd being here today, right? I mean, to think that 12 years later, I'd be talking to you on your podcast is pretty.
Right. It's definitely, like I said, it's crazy when some of the people that you go to school with, you thought you'd never hear from ever again. And, some of those people had an impact on you and some didn't, you know, uh,
And with
being
that being, um, sorry, with that being said, it's like, because, like I said, man, your perception of me, I won't say it's wrong, but it was different than what I thought it was,
yeah,
right? I always liked you as a person. I thought you were a good guy, right? And that's why I have checked up on you since then. And with that being said, if somebody is like feeling suicidal, is feeling down, you really never know who cares, right? Because I can't imagine what you told me, that you imagine that I would care, right? So you never know who cares about you. You never know. But people get busy, man. People get distracted, and do I think it's everybody's job to check up on you? No, I don't. Right, but I do care, right? And I'm always here for you if you really need to talk. Absolutely, you know what I mean. But the moments where you feel that you're just so low, so down, you feel nobody would miss me. That's absolutely not true.
I appreciate that, man. Really, I do. Thank you
Yeah.
for saying that, man. Um, when you look at all that you've accomplished in life, whether that's kickboxing or being a father, and doing what you do for work, do you feel that success is ultimately what you make of it. And this is kind of piggybacking off of that social norm expectation conversation we had.
It's weird, man, because man, I don't know. I something I'm grateful for is probably about 4 years ago. Um, I would just say that a lot of my financial worries went away. Right, I ended up ended up very well economically, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that for the purpose of the fact that I understand now that money doesn't bring happiness in any way, shape, or form. Right. I mean, before that, I wouldn't. Like I said, I'm very poor growing up. Right, but as I started working, I mean, I started, getting well my own, and I was still chasing money. I was chasing money, and then a certain point came where I ended up coming into a lot, and the only reason I'm grateful for that is because I thought that money would bring me happiness. That's why I chased it, right? That's why I was going for it. But when I finally got it, I realized that I could buy. I bought the things I wanted. I bought things I wanted, right? Like my little childhood stupid things that you would say I'll never have this, but then you have it. And then I realized that, wow, hey, I'm still just as sad. I'm still just,
Right.
it doesn't matter. And money does not bring it in any way, shape, or form. And so that's something I'm grateful for. If you don't mind me asking, man, I'm sorry. What was the original question?
It was just do you feel that success is ultimately what you make of it?
Oh yeah. So what I want to say to that is, yeah, I would not classify myself as successful now, by any means, right? I would not think I'm successful until the day that I die, and hopefully I die in a true and honorable place, right? I mean, that's what success is to me, to live my entire life uh, trying to fulfill my purpose, because I know I never will. You know what I mean? I will always chase what I believe to be good, and I know I'll never be that, but I'll always try to be there. But if I die pursuing that faithfully, then that will be successful for me. So I guess to answer your question, yeah, it is we make it, because I don't think I'll ever achieve it.
Right. I love that answer. Mainly because my last podcast was kind of talking about what society thinks that success is. Like you said, money doesn't matter, social status doesn't matter, and there's to me, I 100% agree with you. I don't think there's a blueprint for success. I don't think there is an ideal thing of success either. It's just kind of like what makes you happy and what brings you inner peace. And chasing happiness, like you said, just doesn't. It's not fulfilling to constantly chase happiness because you'll never be happy.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And yeah, I feel people get very upset, man. I keep trying to think about who your audience is, right? They're probably people who suffer from mental health, right? And I'm trying to think about what will make them happy. And I can say, like, it's not that, right? I mean, if you give a depressed person $1 million, I'm guaranteed they're still depressed,
Right.
right? I also guarantee that they think if they had $1 million, they'd be okay, right? But it doesn't bring it. It does not bring it. And yeah, I was leaving it at that, because I don't want to speak for other people, right? But I
And
will.
it's to talk to that point as well. You see these celebrities who've been famous for decades that they're very well off financially, and then all of a sudden one day they're gone. Look at Aaron Carter. We grew up around the same time. We grew up in the 90s, and we know the impact he had on 90s kids. He wasn't like Led Zeppelin where he would last for decades, but he had his place in success, just like the Beatles did, whoever it is. And then you bring them to now, and it's just like if you ask them what they would change about their life, it's probably because being in that spotlight of fame or having that much money and not being happy, even though they have all that money available to them.
Yeah, and even more prevalent than just like dying, or just some commit suicide or whatever. I mean, it's very very drug abuse is very prominent in a lot of the industry, right? And why is that? Well, it's obvious because they're chasing something, right? They're chasing that high, they're chasing that happiness, and they're not finding it in their money. They're not finding it in their fame, right? So I would say that to a young man, like, hey, like, or a young woman, before you chase that, look at the people who have it.
Right.
They're still chasing, right? And so it's never ending. and or time's never ending. That's just not where you find it.
Yeah. Like, it's always, you always appreciate those artists or, celebrities that, are just starting off, and you see how humble they are because of where they came from. And, they still don't have a lot because they're still building their brand. But like you said, when they're given all that money and they're still not happy with all that money, it's just like they keep chasing. And because they didn't have that fulfillment, they didn't feel that happiness that they thought they were going to feel.
Yeah. I'm sorry, my voice is going a little bit.
It's okay.
But it's very unfortunate. Do many of your audience, they ever reach out to you as far as like
all the time?
Yeah, so like if you don't mind me, I don't want to obviously not name drop anybody, but like is that the problem they have, is chasing success or chasing value or validation? Or
I think validation is a really big one, just kind of like chasing that self-worth, chasing that thing of value in their life, or, just trying to cope with loss or things like that. That's a big part of the audience that listens.
how much of that do you think is literally the reality, right? Because obviously if somebody is in a just miserable situation, like you think about the situation in Fort Myers right now, people lose their homes, right? It's like, okay, I understand, you're sad. You should be sad. You just lost everything, right? But you can overcome it. But how much of that do you think it's outside, and how much do you think it's inside, like intrinsic in them, as far as chasing?
I think a lot of it's inside. I feel that the things that are going on outside are things that you can change. Like you said, when you fractured your leg, you're like, yeah, this sucks, but you're moving forward. And I feel like if I'm speaking for myself and not for the audience right now, I would say, this situation, that whatever I'm in, it sucks, but I know I can improve the situation. I know I can change the situation. And that's one of the biggest things about mental health struggles. And people with like disorders, whatever it is, like BPD or whatever it is, I know those people struggle a little bit more pushing forward, because that, it's just kind of one of those chemical imbalances that they can't help. And then you have somebody who might struggle with depression, and they just kind of, they eat up the thoughts like, I'm not good enough, or, I'm not doing enough in this life, and, whatever thoughts that they're going through. But I definitely feel it's more internal than it is external, because you could always improve the situation you're in no matter what.
Yeah. And it's sad that you keep mentioning suicide, right? And obviously, I mean, neither one of us have done it, right? But I would imagine that for somebody to be in that place, to actually take their own life, I mean, that's very difficult. And obviously, you should steer anybody away from that. I would say the way to do it is, like I said, if you don't live for yourself, right? So instead of death, right, giving your life to the grave, just literally give your life to a greater purpose, right? I mean, either way, it's gone, right? Either way, it's not yours anymore. So at least give it to something positive, because there's no coming back from death. That's
Right.
said earlier.
Yeah, and the biggest thing about that I try to talk about with people that are feeling suicidal, because I was working with a crisis hotline, and the biggest thing about without talking about any of the conversations I had, is de-escalating that person. And I know in your line of work you have to de-escalate a situation before anything else, right? And when it comes to somebody that's suicidal, you got to de-escalate the situation. You got to build that what's the word, got to build that relationship, rapport, right? And just kind of let them know that they're not alone, man. Like, a lot of people don't know what it means to be there for other people, or aren't willing to put themselves in the situation of being there for other people. So when it comes to like suicidal people, man, like there's always that misconception, like, oh, well, they just don't want to deal with what they're dealing with anymore, so that's why they're feeling suicidal. It's like, it's so much more than that, man. Like, I've seen people who were suicidal and meant to do it, and then I've seen people who were saying that they felt suicidal and just needed somebody to listen, man. That's when I almost took my life. I just wanted somebody to hear me. I wanted somebody to see me, and I felt invisible. I felt like nothing that I was doing mattered, and there are those people in this community, unfortunately, that put a bad stigma around people that feel suicidal and just kind of do it without wanting to help themselves. I was in a situation with somebody in the group who was, posting some pretty scary stuff. And I called the crisis hotline and had them do a wellness check, had somebody sent to their house to do a wellness check to make sure they're okay. And I'm like, if you're not responding to messages, which, you're in that state of mind where you don't want to speak, I get it. But, you got to be willing to help yourself too. You can't just, cry in the spilt milk to be, whatever it is,
Yeah, and I guess with that being said, like I'm just curious how much, like, it's something that's very sensitive, right? So if you're working on a hotline, it's very sensitive, right? But
very. Mm-hmm.
you can't give in to everything, right? I imagine you can't. You're talking to them, you can't say, "Oh yeah, well that is bad." That is, but you can't keep going down that negative path with them,
Yeah.
right?
So basically,
Yeah.
basically they have like that layout of how you're supposed to have conversations. Like you can humanize some of your responses, but the formula and the format that they have in those conversations is just kind of like, if it gets to the point of where you need to get like law enforcement involved, and that has happened. um but yeah, they don't really let you humanize too much. I think it froze. There we go. They don't really let you humanize your responses too much.
I was just curious about that.
Yeah. And I kind of wish they did, but I get why they don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, because some people's humanizing is a lot worse than other people's humanizing.
Absolutely. Right.
Sometimes
I had a response one time where they're like, "Oh, this is just an automated response. You're just saying what they want you to say to me." And I asked the supervisor at the time, like, can I talk to them like a person? Because like if I'm trying to de-escalate somebody or I'm trying to help somebody, I want them to know that there's somebody actually listening, like somebody actually talking. And they're like, yeah, you just keep it very short. Like, don't like say too much of yourself into those responses because, obviously you don't want to send that person over more than they already are.
a liability.
Yeah, exactly. So I had one more question on here, just kind of to wrap up this conversation. If there was one thing about how mental health is handled or perceived in society that you could change, what would it be?
That's tough, man. Actually, I didn't read that question prior to this, but well, there's one thing I could change. By the way, mental health in society. I guess it goes both ways, man. Because I think everything's balanced, right? So I want people to know, hey, like it's okay to talk about it, right? But it's definitely not okay to do, right? So I mean, some of the stigma comes along with it, but the opposite side of that is what you tell everybody, hey, it's okay to want to kill yourself, because it's not. It's not okay to want to kill yourself, right? But if you do have that problem, I mean, it's obviously very touchy, and you should talk to somebody about it, and every way, shape, and form. I don't know how that's really handled. I'm sure you would know better than I would. I mean, would understand if some people are like, oh, they're just doing it for attention. They're not actually going to do it, right? I would say stay away from that because you don't know who's going to do it. You really don't know. Sometimes you see these pictures. I can tell you this. I had a friend about 2 years ago. I saw him probably about 4 days before. 4 days before I saw him. I didn't blow him off or anything, but I was kind of in a rush. Or something in the neighborhood. I said hello to him, right? But I was also trying to chase my son somewhere. I said hello to him, talked to him for about 2 minutes. And, we walked off. He said, hey, like, we get together sometime. Take care, right? 4 days later, he ended up shooting and killing himself. And you never, you really never know, because I never would have expected. That guy was in a secular sense, he was very successful. He had a very prominent job. He had a lot of money. He had a wife and a kid, beautiful family, and it's just you really you never know who would actually do it, right? And with that also being said, something I learned from that is, that's 4 days prior, naturally, part of me, the narcissism, me kind of blame myself a little bit, right? Like, hey, like I could have said something, right? If I just would have known, if I just would have known, I could have stopped him, or I could have befriended him. Hey, like talk to him a little bit longer, invite him over, whatever, right? But then, so I felt some intrinsic guilt in myself, but none of that even compares to what I imagine his wife and kids feel, right? Because they're closer to him. I'm very far removed from him. We're friends, but we're very far removed from being his wife and kids. You know what I mean? And to think that you're leaving the world, and that if I blame myself, I would imagine his family blame themselves. You know what I mean? And it's just another reason. It's such a selfish thing. Right? Like it really is so selfish, because like I told you, man, I've, I've definitely seen death, right? And it's just raw. It's very raw. Right? You would imagine somebody you love finding you in that state. It's absolutely selfish if you were to do that to yourself. And I guess it's very touchy, right? I try not to say something too bad about it, because I'm not trying to upset anybody. But you should think about others before you think about yourself. You should think about the people you're leaving behind before you think about what you're leaving behind, right? Because it's really not about you. You really should get past that. This life is about you and your happiness. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I would change. I'm not a professional. I'm not you. You know what I mean? I don't have a mental health podcast. I'm not a hot what do you call yourself? Like
Right.
on
It's a crisis hotline counselor.
about that, right? So I don't want to give any bad ideas, because I think that'd be overstepping. But I would hope that people who actually were committed to that, I would hope that the society would change in a way that they felt open enough to talk about it and get the help that they needed.
So the basically more resources, kind of.
Yeah, but like not more resources. You can put all the resources in the world, but if we're still afraid to talk about it, still afraid to talk about it.
That's true.
Right. So I mean, I don't necessarily know more resource answer. I don't know that's not the answer, but I would if we're talking about society, I would hope that your friends and family would take care of you before. In my opinion, I would hope that your friends and family would take care of you before some other entity would, some other resource entity, whatever that may be, right? Provided by the government. I hope your friends and family take care of you first. And I guess that's what I would change.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely I agree. When it comes to the conversation of suicide, it's there's always that conversation of, is it selfish, is it not selfish? And I can speak on both sides of it, because I was on the verge of it. I had a plan, I had the means to do it and everything. I attempted when I was 14 and attempted again when I was in Jersey. It's something that I didn't consider anybody else, because I was in such a bad state of mind and just wanted the pain to stop. I wanted to stop feeling the way that I was feeling. And then
Yeah,
you
well,
look at, go ahead.
all right, good. And with that being said, I mean, now I'm glad you didn't commit suicide, right? But it's also just about a person who has a child, right?
Mhm.
I do think I do that's a different situation, right? I mean, it's absolutely wrong and terrible in both senses. But if you have a child that you brought into this world that you are absolutely responsible for, morally, legally, ethically, in every way, shape, and form, and for you to leave that child, I do think that's different. And I think I'm more. I don't know, but that's
It's
think about
no,
my.
it's a very valid argument. Absolutely agree. And that's why I was saying I can speak on both sides of it, because in certain situations, I feel if you're not trying to help yourself and you're not trying to look for that help for yourself, or tell somebody that you need help. And I know, coming from me, it was the hardest thing was looking for help, for wanting help, right? And then you look at what you were saying of being a parent and looking at it from that aspect of, you have kids and this and that and everything else. And sometimes people just get to that point, man, where just nothing is worth it anymore. And obviously, I'm not saying suicide's okay. I would never say that, because it's not. But I think the conversation of it being selfish it's a very there's that weird line, I guess, where you can understand both sides of it, where, that person may have been going to therapy for years, or that person was doing all these outstanding things in their life. Like, one of my heroes is Chester Bennington. He was the lead singer for Linkin Park, and, he took his life in 2017, had a wife and kids, and he always spoke about his mental health struggles. And sometimes those demons just, they win, and it's hard to come to that conclusion, because you don't want to hear, somebody took their life ever. I certainly hate hearing it. And I definitely agree with you when it comes to their wife and kids. Like, you have other people to consider too. So why not get the help that you deserve for yourself, right? But sometimes that help just doesn't help.
Yeah, speak of that. I mean, man, I don't want to beat a dead horse, man. You talk about the demons winning. I can tell you, I mean, it does not matter the state that I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to offend anybody. It doesn't matter the state that I'm in. None of my demons, right? None of my past, none of my regrets, none of my insecurities or anything like that. Even if I really want to myself, none of that stronger than the love that I have for my family, right? And I guess the old quote, right? Love conquers all, right? And it really does. I think your situation is a little bit different, right? I mean, I still wouldn't think it's okay, right? But you were in a situation where you thought you had nobody, right? Your own mother you felt was against you, right? You don't have kids, I mean, say your father wasn't running your life, so you probably felt very alone. I would imagine that's the opposite, right? Thinking gonna miss me, anything like that, right? I think that's two very different situations. Neither one is okay. I definitely think they need to be thought of and approached differently.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And like I said, I don't think your opinion is wrong at all. Like I said, it's a debate that I've heard for years. It's a conversation I've had with people since I got into the mental health community. And, your opinion is just as valid as anybody else's. I don't think your opinion's wrong. I just think that, and I know you're open-minded to seeing both sides, obviously, as we just spoke on. So, like I said, it's a very hard conversation to have with people.
No, absolutely, man. Absolutely. But
so, at the end of every podcast, I like to read a quote, mental health related or just anything in general. Before I read that one, did you want to say anything to our listeners before we wrap this one up?
No, I would thank you for allowing me to be here. Right? If they listen to this far, I would thank them for listening. I would say that. Okay, I can't say it's okay, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, if anybody needs to actually reach out to somebody, if somebody really needs it, I mean, I'm sure you're here for them, right? I'm sure they know you're here for them. Myself as well. Like, I would never want anybody to feel alone in this world, right? And there's plenty of times when I felt alone. For me, I found company in my God, right? My God, Bible, things like that, right? I would hope that they could find their way to overcome that, right? That feeling of loneliness. I would hope, and if other people are listening too, I would hope that you're there for those people who are going through that as well.
Absolutely.
And that I'll end it on that.
Yeah, man. And like I said, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I think this is one of the best conversations beginning to end I've had on here, just because we dug into so much and I wasn't sure at first how it would go, and I'm glad it went great. So again, I greatly appreciate you, man.
Absolutely, my friend. Anytime.
So for this quote, it comes from Trusty Scribe. For all the storms you've weathered, all the heartbreaks you've suffered, all the physical and emotional scars you carry, all the setbacks, the bruises, the failures and defeats, these are the things that make you whole and complete. This is what makes you beautiful and unique. You are not you are not alone. You are loved and you are golden. So again, thank you guys so much for listening. And Leigh, thank you again for being an awesome guest. For all my listeners, this podcast will drop on Tuesday. And remember, be well and always be gentle with yourselves. Take care, guys.